Why does there always seem to be a controversy in our space regarding who's a real producer? And one of the main reasons is because we're speaking about a lot of non-traditional roles within the hip-hop genre. And with AI getting better and better each day, these roles and these lines are gonna get even blurrier. And to speak on this, I'm gonna be reacting to a video by a content creator named Tokyo Extraordinaire. She's a producer, artist, engineer, does just about everything creatively. Speaking about her journey and understanding these roles and how it helped her creatively, make sure you stay tuned to the very end of this video because you're gonna walk away with a lot of excellent, valuable information. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it.
What's good, and welcome to the first installment of Extraordinary Sound with myself, Tokyo Extraordinaire. I am a recording artist, music producer, songwriter, and audio engineer on the music side. Then I'm a videographer and photographer on the visual side. Enough about that. In this video, I want to talk about music producers versus audio engineering or audio engineers. When I first got into music years ago, I was just very confused by all of the different titles: executive producer and music producer and audio engineer. What do these different people do? So music producers, at the foundation, their core of what they do, music producers come in and they make the beat or the instrumental that an artist will eventually sing or rap over.
I even have to stop her already right there. As we speak right now, there is a clip of Terrace Martin, the very talented multi-instrumentalist producer for just about everyone, speaking about how the person who makes the beat isn't the producer and it's actually the person in the recording studio directing the song. So we can already see that there's a conflict between who's a real producer and who's not a real producer. Is it the person who makes the beat? Is the person in the studio who's actually helping to coach and complete the song? Or is it the person behind the Pro Tools as the recording artist works through their verses, through their hooks, who's having them do multiple takes? So this is another point of contention amongst the music production community, and it's just interesting to see. And then I'm actually curious on how things are gonna go as, once again, AI starts to get better and better, and possibly there might be some tool that you could just click on and create and generate a really fire beat. As of right now, AI is not there yet. It can have pieces of instruments. It's pretty good right now, but as far as the whole thing, it's not there. But let's go ahead and get back into it.
Audio engineering side of it, there's actually 3 different types of audio engineering for recorded music. So you have a recording engineer, you have a mix engineer, you have a mastering engineer. So your recording engineer is going to come into the studio and they're going to record the artist. But if you don't record them right, you're going to spend a lot of time on your mix doing surgery, and that's not what your mix is supposed to be about. I think when you first start out, your mixes are typically really difficult to deal with only because you got a really bad recording off top. And I think we kind of learn it backwards. You think you're supposed to add all of these different plugins in, and that's where that comes into play on the mixing side. And it's like, no, mixing should actually be fun. With mixing, you get to make a lot of dope creative decisions that I didn't learn this until later because I was recording wrong. You know, you're either recording too low or you're recording too hot, where your vocals, you can look at a mixer or look at what's being input into your DAW. You can see it's in the red. If it's in the red, you are too far. You should not be that high up. You're hot. So you bring it down a little bit to make sure you get leveled vocals. So that's what a recording engineer does. Like, you want to make sure you're not just pressing record just for the sake of, but you're actually getting good takes from the artist.
All right, now this is another point of contention within the audio engineering community. A lot of you guys may not be familiar with this, but one thing that's been going on is in different recording studios, especially mid-sized recording studios in major cities, recording artists are coming into the studio and expecting something that sounds like or close to a finished product. So they're walking in, they're booking the studio time. They're like, hey, my homeboy knows how to record me and get me sounding with all the effects and the auto-tune dialed in and everything sounding really good. That's what I'm expecting when I actually purchase real studio time and walk in your studio. And a lot of the engineers who are in their 30s and been doing it for a little bit, they're going through the traditional route, the older school audio engineering, like she mentioned, where you just come in to record, they make you sound decent, they make you sound good. They're really looking to capture the best possible take as opposed to basically mixing as you record. And that's one thing that really has separated Atlanta audio engineers from other engineers in different places. is how rapidly we can quickly go through things. We can quickly do multiple takes. We have the punch-in method that people have been speaking about, where recording artists would just say 2 words, then you have to go back and they want to do the next word, and you go back, then they want to do the next word. So then they're basically piecing together their entire verse, and some engineers from other locations really haven't been able to keep up to that lightning fast speed. So that's why we have so many the hotkeys and Pro Tools. As a matter of fact, if you look in my description, you can check out a guide I made on some very popular hotkeys that you're going to need if you do want to move quickly in Pro Tools. So make sure you guys check that out in the description. The game just keeps changing. Expectations keep changing. So we have to learn how to evolve and adapt, or stand firm on our positions when it comes to producing and when it comes to engineering. But let's get back into the video.
It's like you want to make sure you're not just pressing record just for the sake of, but you're actually getting good takes from the artist. That artists aren't punching in random places. That's a whole nother issue where you'll find yourself having to do surgery in your mix when it shouldn't be all of that. Your recording process is probably one of the most important parts of getting great vocals and getting good takes for your final mix. So once you get all your vocals recorded, you get good takes, send it over to your mix engineer if it is a separate person, or you sit down and now you start to process and think like a person that's mixing. It's just equalizing everything. You get to make creative decisions, but it's also making sure that it's consumable, that it's not piercing to the ear, that you're not struggling to understand what the artist is trying to say. It's making sure everything is leveled, that the vocals aren't clashing with the instruments, that even the instruments aren't clashing with each other. It's making sure your vocals aren't clashing with each other. It's separating your lead vocal from harmonies, separating your harmonies from ad-libs, and that's where panning comes into place. You may pan something hard to the left or hard to the right. If that's a creative decision, that it really is a creative decision, but that's what your mix engineer would typically do. They'll come in and make sure your vocals are now mixed to a place of perfection.
And this is another point when it comes to recording engineering or just recording artists in the studio that a lot of producers or beat makers may not be aware of. And that's the fact that a lot of recording artists are getting those tight beats from YouTube, adding them into those YouTube to MP3 converters, and not really caring too much about the audio quality degradation that's happening whenever they're just converting it straight off of YouTube and then coming into the recording studio and wanting something to sound good. And this is something that engineers have had to adapt to, as far as trying to get the vocal to sound clear and not compete with the instruments when the only thing that you have is a ripped MP3 from YouTube. So different audio engineers have exchanged just different tactics and different tools and just different workarounds to try to get things sounding as good as possible, because some of these recording artists just flat out don't have the budget to either buy the beats with the track outs because they're trying to create these big projects and put them out there. Also, some of these recording artists don't have the budget to actually get a full mix, to get the mixing service from the mixing engineer. So they just said, hey, listen, streaming is here. There's a demand for volume. I have my fans. I just want to put this song out. I need to make sure that I'm still relevant amongst the people. So do the best you can with this degraded MP3. So I've been in situations and I've learned different tactics from different engineers. Some engineers will use track spacer. They'll use Soothe 2 and then sidechain the vocal. So then the vocal will just punch through all the instruments in the MP3 so it's not clashing or anything like that. Even though you don't have the track outs, you have to try to find a way to make things sound as good as possible. So if you're an engineer and you can get things sounding as good as possible and people are working on a tight budget, or you can be the man or the woman in your city because you're able to do things that other engineers refuse to, and that's to get things sounding really good with this tight budget, with this ripped MP3 from YouTube. So a lot of audio engineering purists might cringe and wince at the thought of doing that, especially having that released with their name on it. I get it. Some engineers will say, take my name off of it or use a pseudonym, but that's just the name of the game. Hyper consumptive situation when it comes to music. So
Derek Ali, Mixed by Ali, one of TDE's main engineers. He has done most of Kendrick Lamar's projects, and he is probably one of the most creative and dope engineers out there. And I love when music producers and artists and engineers and artists develop such a dope relationship to where everybody just operates in their own creative flow. If you go back and listen to Swimming Pools, there's a lot of things happening in that record that people will assume it's the artist only, it's their idea, or that it's the music producer's idea, but mix engineers are like low-key, high-key secondary music producers with some of the creative choices they make when they are able to operate in that space. So just as like a sidebar, go and listen to Swimming Pools by Kendrick Lamar, specifically with headphones, so you can really pay attention to a lot of the panning and creative decisions that Ali made on that record. It's why that record, I think, so many people gravitated towards it. It's obviously a dope record, but what makes a dope record? It's some of those intricacies that were placed within that. So go back and listen to that record and you'll see what I'm talking about.
All right, now this gets to another point of contention amongst mix engineers, music producers, and recording engineers. This might just be called the beef episode, because there's a lot of things that a lot of people don't really know what's going on underneath the surface. They just assume it's the rappers that beef and get into feuds. What I'm speaking about is sometimes you have recording engineers that are so good, they get things just so buttery smooth and so perfect, and then the mix engineer is just taking it to a couple notches up. So the recording engineer is in there recording the multiple takes, recording the guitarist, adding different types of effects, coming up with creative ideas, maybe even messing with some of the songwriting, maybe even making suggestions on restructuring things. And then if that gets to a mix engineer, especially if a person is, let's just say it's even an indie artist who gets lucky and gets a somewhat popular mixing engineer, and then that starts to blow up, a lot of people might start to attribute a lot of the changes and a lot of the success of the song specifically to the mixing engineer, when maybe a lot of what happened to get to that point actually came from the recording engineer. On top of that, then you have the discrepancy between the mix engineer and the music producer. Like she mentioned, the mixing engineer can even act as a secondary music producer because they're adding maybe all types of harmony effects, doing all types of, once again, restructuring to the song that they already have, coming up with just different creative ideas, like the Going Bad song by Drake, that the way the piano sounds, that's not how the original producer had it. It was actually Jason Joshua used something called RC20 to make that really detuned sound that made the song so addictive. So the question is, if a mixing engineer made that creative decision that made that song so addictive, does that mixing engineer now deserve some of the credit? Should they get some of the production credits? Do they need some of the publishing on the song? Of course, if you're a bigger engineer like Jason Joshua, you could probably demand that. But let's just say you're a mid-tier person, or you're a lower-tier mixing engineer. You're not quite there. How would you negotiate? How would you get to that point where you're able to get some of the publishing as a mixing engineer? It's another little tug of war that different people go through. So
last one, again, is the mastering engineer. Once everything is mixed, it'll get sent over to the master engineer, who goes in and puts like that final bow or that cherry on top of the sundae, where you're adding like these small elements. Because when you're dealing with the mix as a mix engineer, you're dealing with everything as individual instruments or individual tracks. So you'll have a track that has your lead instrument, a track that has drums, a track that has bass, a track that has vocals, and you're going in and tweaking every single thing as an individual. Once you get to your master, it's already been exported as what we call a 2-track. And the 2-track is just another word for an MP3 or a wave. So everything has kind of been put together. They put that final touch on it that just gives it that shimmer, that professional top quality sound. And there's different plugins that you could use to get a good master, but your master, just like your mix, should not be you doing surgery. It shouldn't be you overcorrecting anything. Like, your mix should have already been done properly, so that by the time you get to your master, you're just now enhancing what's already there.
All right, the mastering engineer. Now, one thing I can say from my personal experience is I've rarely met mastering engineers. I've probably spoken to one in person. We were working with a indie recording artist, and I would speak to that mastering engineer from time to time. But other than that, just going off the top of my head, maybe one, maybe possibly two, but there's way more mixing engineers, music producers, recording engineers out there in general. So, you know, if you're out there, you want to learn something, you want to learn a valuable skill, possibly learn to be a mastering engineer, let's go ahead and get back into the video.
Your mix should have already been done properly so that by the time you get to your master, you're just now enhancing what's already there. The caveat to that, if you didn't mix correctly, everything that you messed up in your mix is going to show up in your master because it's going to overcompensate or over-exaggerate what's already there. So if you didn't correctly tweak your highs or your lows or your mids, when you go to start mixing, you're mixing everything at once, or you're mastering everything at once. And if your artist said, I want it to have a disco 70s feel, I want my highs to really pop, but on your mix, you didn't get the mix right, or whoever had the mix didn't get the mix right, it's going to sound piercing to the ear if they didn't correct and level those highs out in the actual mix. So that is the difference between recording engineers and music producers. And I know that it was even more heavy on the recording side because there are just so many different types of engineers, but it is definitely possible to develop and master one part and go on to learn those other aspects of it to further your skill set, which just makes you more of an asset in any room, any studio you walk into, because you have the knowledge to just be able to help out in any way that you can.
Yes, and that's a really great way to end off the video. At the end of the day, as creators behind the scene, the main thing that we're trying to do is add more value to the recording artist. So if we're really stuck in our ego and we're stuck in the past and there's new needs that are coming up within the marketplace and we're just standing firm, then we could be doing a disservice to the recording artist. Like I said before, there's a group of recording artists who are looking to book 4 hours of studio time, and when they leave, they want something that sounds and feels like a final record. Whenever they get home and they play the song on their speakers, they want the lows to sound good, they want the mids to sound good, they want the highs to sound good, and that's what they're looking for. So if you're not able to do that, then they're just going to search around for someone who can. Some will be okay and adapt and stay with the older school recording process, their mixing process, and their mastering process, which is the general consensus, but some are like, hey, this is all I got. I want things to sound like this. And once again, it is a debate amongst audio engineers on whether that should be done and whether that's cheapening up the game. So there's a lot of things to ponder about, a lot of things to think about. That was a great video, and it definitely gave me a lot of ideas when it comes to conversations that we should be having as a community. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you hit like and subscribe. My name is Desmond A, and I'll be back with more great videos. Peace. Wait, before you go, make sure you go to DesmondASounds.com where you can get free FL Studio Patcher plugins, free loops, free guides, everything you need to level up your music production. Once again, go to DesmondASounds.com or click the link in the description. Go there now and totally transform your music production.